Before human beings knew how to measure the height of the sky, before they named each layer of cloud and every current of wind, the sky had already been placed in its position within the order of creation. It was not born of randomness, nor was it a meaningless void between Earth and the universe. From the very beginning, the sky carried within it a sacred purpose. And God said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water." The sky was created as a living boundary, not to divide absolutely, but to preserve order. It is the breath of creation, a space of ceaseless movement between high and low, between the visible and the invisible, between what human beings can touch and what they can only lift their eyes toward. The sky is not a place humans enter with their feet, but a place where they learn the meaning of limits. And when God looked upon the sky, he did not leave it empty. For in his creation, no space is without purpose. He created the birds of the air, not to rule the earth as humans do, not to govern the seas as fish do, but to dwell in between heaven and earth, between the material and the spiritual, between life that is growing and life that is fading. Birds do not fully belong to the earth, nor do they fully belong to the heavens. They were placed in the open air as a reminder that some creatures are created to connect, not to possess. And God said, "Your domain is the sky, not to own it, but to keep it alive." From that moment on, the sky was no longer merely space, it became a way of life. Yet God did not give the birds storehouses. He did not teach them to sow or require them to store up for tomorrow. They have no granaries, no permanent dwellings, no maps for a distant future. And God said to humankind, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them." This was not a call to laziness or surrender, but a revelation about one's rightful place. The calling of the birds is trust. They live fully in today, fly within the winds of the present, and carry no burden of tomorrow upon their wings. Therefore, the sky does not become a place of accumulation, but a place of circulation. Air circulates, life circulates, the rhythm of creation remains in balance. If birds were to store up as humans do, the sky would grow heavy, and if the sky grew heavy, the life below would suffocate. But God did not create a chaotic sky. Freedom in creation is not disorder. Each species of bird has its own height. Some fly low near fields and people. Some soar high, close to the sun and strong winds. Some travel far only when seasons change and then return. No creature flies outside its calling without paying a price. And God said, "Freedom is not flying wherever you wish, but flying where I have placed you." Swallows do not envy eagles. Sparrows do not compete with seagulls, for they know their place. They do not compare heights, do not fight for the sky, do not attempt to seize the position of another. Humans are different. When humans forget their place, they seek to fly higher than they can bear, to reach the sky with metal, to divide the air into property, to turn the heavens into roots, resources, and tools. And the sky begins to tear. Not because birds have flown wrongly, but because humans no longer know when to stop. Few notice that forests are not planted only from the ground. Some forests begin in the sky. Birds carry seeds within them, fly across valleys, cross deep rivers, pass over barren lands, and release life into places human hands never reach. They do not know they are planting forests, yet they remain faithful to their calling. And God said, "I use those who fly above to heal the lands that have been forgotten." The calling of the sky is to reconnect what has been divided. Where humans build fences, birds pass over them. Where war splits the land, birds choose no side. Where humans abandon places because they yield no profit, birds continue to sow life. They make no speeches, receive no honour, leave no record of achievement, yet every beat of their wings is an act of silent obedience. And it is within that silence that the sky fulfills its mission, to keep life moving forward, to prevent creation from breaking apart, and to ensure that humankind still has something to lift their eyes toward, and to relearn how to live within their true place. The sky and the sin of human pride. In the beginning, the sky was given to the birds of the air, not to humankind. Not because humans were of lesser value, but because humans are prone to forget their place. God placed human beings on the earth, gave them feet to stand firm, hands to tend and care, and eyes to look upward, not to take possession. But humanity was not content with merely looking. They wanted to touch, then to surpass, finally to rule. And from that moment on, the sin of pride began to rise with the sky. God had spoken that everything has its appointed place: the land for plants to grow, the sea for fish to swim, the sky for birds to fly, humanity for stewardship. Yet humans said within their hearts, we too can fly, we too can rise high, we too can stand in the place of God. And so they began to build towers, not towers for shelter, not towers to gaze at the stars, but towers to prove that they needed no limits. Those towers rose not out of faith, but out of pride. They were built not with prayer, but with ambition. And for the first time, the sky was challenged by humankind. God looked down, not with blazing anger, but with deep sorrow. For he saw what humans could not see, that when humans sought to claim the sky, they had already lost the ground beneath their feet. God did not destroy the tower because it was tall. He destroyed it because it was built upon forgetfulness of one's rightful place. From that time on, whenever humans looked up at the sky, they did not always look with reverence. Often they looked with comparison, comparing themselves to the birds of the air, comparing their intelligence to the one who created intelligence itself. Humans began to call the sky space to be conquered. They named layers of cloud as if they were territory. They drew flight paths, divided boundaries, imposed laws, and they forgot that the sky was never created to belong to anyone. Birds fly and leave no trace. Humans fly and leave noise behind. Birds fly carrying seeds. Humans fly carrying weapons. And the sky grew heavy, not heavy with clouds, not heavy with rain, but heavy with human intent. God once set the rainbow in the sky as a covenant, not a covenant of domination, but a covenant of preservation. Yet humans came to see the rainbow as a phenomenon, no longer as a reminder. They said, we understand the sky. But in truth, they had only measured its height. They had never understood humility. Human pride does not lie in flying high, but in believing that flying high makes them greater. The eagle soars very high, yet when it descends, it still seeks low places to build its nest. Humans are different. The higher they rise, the more they forget the way back. God does not forbid humans from creating. He does not forbid them from exploring. He offers only one warning. When you forget that the sky is a gift, it will become a burden. And indeed, the sky began to respond in its own way, not with words, but with signs. Winds grew more violent, weather became unpredictable, the air carried invisible wounds, not because the sky was angry, but because it was no longer being listened to. Humans grew accustomed to commanding the sky, but no longer knew how to ask what it needed. They grew used to using the sky, but forgot how to give thanks. God looked at the birds of the air and saw that they still flew at their proper height. God looked at humankind and saw that they flew beyond what their hearts could bear. And God spoke not loudly, I am not opposed to you flying. I grieve only that you have forgotten why you fly. Do you fly to connect or to compete? Do you fly to sow life or to display power? Do you fly to look toward me or to replace me? Those questions hang suspended in the sky like clouds yet to release rain. For pride does not collapse in a single day. It accumulates layer by layer like compressed air. And eventually the sky can bear no more. Yet even then, God still allows the birds to fly. For the birds remind humankind that it is possible to be very high and yet not lose obedience. And that is what humanity must relearn if the sky is ever to become once more a place of life and not a symbol of pride. Part 3. Migratory birds. Lessons on timing and obedience. God did not create the birds of the sky to remain forever in one place. Some species are born to stay, but others are called by the act of leaving. When the seasons shift, when the light changes direction, when the temperature of earth and sky is no longer suitable, migratory birds quietly prepare. They do not hold meetings, they do not argue, they do not wait for consensus. They simply listen, and when the time comes, they fly. Not earlier, not later, not out of fear, not out of ambition, but in obedience to the rhythm placed within creation. God speaks to migratory birds not with words, but with signs, through the length of the day, the direction of the wind, and a deep inner sensing that humans call instinct, but which is in truth the memory of obedience engraved from the very beginning. Migratory birds do not fly because they understand the entire journey. They fly even when they cannot see the destination. They leave familiar places while food is still available, while the nest still stands, while the sky still feels known. And this is what confuses humanity. For humans are only willing to go when they are certain, only willing to change when forced, only willing to let go when no other option remains. God looks at migratory birds and sees what humanity has lost: trust in his timing. Birds do not stay simply because a place was once good. They do not leave merely because another place promises more. They go because the time has come, and when the time has come, staying becomes disobedience. Humans are different. Humans often confuse perseverance with stubbornness, loyalty with fear. They stay too long in seasons that have already passed. They cling to what once sustained them but is now draining them. They call it stability, but it is stagnation. God does not condemn humans for fearing change. He grieves when they no longer know how to listen for timing. Migratory birds fly in formation, not to display strength, but to conserve energy for one another. The weak are supported by the strong. Those behind benefit from the wind carried by those ahead. A bird flies alone unless it has become separated from the flock, and the one that is separated always faces greater danger. God teaches about community not through laws, but through wings aligned across the sky. Humans, however, often learn the opposite. They want to lead without needing anyone. They want to fly high without sharing the burden. They call it freedom. But freedom without obedience becomes isolation. Migratory birds do not choose their own routes. They follow paths remembered across generations, not because they lack creativity, but because some paths are not meant to be altered. God placed these routes not to restrict, but to protect. Humans, by contrast, are always eager to draw new paths, even when the old ones are still true, and when they become lost, they blame the sky. Migratory birds do not ask why the journey is so long. They do not ask why they must cross oceans, deserts, and high mountains. They do not negotiate with creation. They simply obey, and that obedience keeps them alive. God declares that not every hardship is a sign of error. Some hardships are signs that the path is right. Humans, however, are quick to give up when they are tired, even when they are standing at the most critical part of the journey. Migratory birds know when to stop. They do not fly endlessly to prove strength. They rest when rest is needed. They eat when nourishment is needed. They hide when storms arrive. Obedience does not make them reckless, it makes them wise. Humans often use faith as an excuse for not listening. They call recklessness courage. They call stubbornness faithfulness. And they forget that the God of order never invites humans to move against the rhythm of life. When migratory birds arrive, they do not take possession. They stay only for the proper season. When the season ends, they leave again. They build no claims of ownership. They carve no names into the land. They leave behind very little, except balance preserved. Humans, by contrast, want to remain forever in places meant to be temporary. They want to turn grace into entitlement. And when they are required to leave, they call it loss instead of the completion of a cycle. God uses migratory birds to remind humanity that life is not only about staying, but also about leaving. Not only about holding on, but also about letting go. Not only about acting, but also about waiting. Timing does not belong to the strongest, nor to the most intelligent. Timing belongs to those who listen. And obedience does not make humans smaller. It places them in the right position to be sustained. Migratory birds fly very far, yet they do not become lost because they do not fly according to their own will. Humans lose their way not because they go too far, but because they go without obedience. Part 4th, when the sky is polluted, God's warning. In the beginning, the sky was created in purity. There was no smoke, no smell of burning, no veil between human eyes and the light. The sky was the place where light descended and prayers ascended. But humanity gradually forgot this. They did not pollute the sky in a single day. They did it little by little, through small choices, through convenience, by placing benefit above responsibility. God was not silent when the sky began to change color. He was patient, patient as he had always been with humanity through many generations. For pollution does not begin with smokestacks, it begins in the human heart. When people no longer see the sky as a gift, they begin to see it as an empty space where unwanted things can be discarded. They say, "Up there, who can see?" And that very question exposes a spiritual fracture. For what humans believe no one sees, God still sees. The sky began to bear invisible wounds, not the wounds of war, but the wounds of indifference. Birds flew lower, migrations fell out of rhythm, seasons no longer resembled seasons. But humans called it natural fluctuation to avoid facing their own responsibility. God did not punish the sky, he allowed the sky to reflect what humanity was sowing. When the air grew heavy, it was not only an environmental problem, but a sign of a life out of balance. People began to struggle to breathe, not only in their lungs, but in their souls. They looked upward, but could no longer see clearly. Not because the sky had disappeared, but because too many layers stood between them and the truth. God once used clouds to guide, wind to give life, and fire from heaven to reveal his power. Now clouds carry dust, wind carries toxins, and fire from the sky has become a source of fear. Not because God has changed, but because humanity has distorted the signs. When the sky is polluted, the birds of the air do not protest. They simply begin to disappear. And that is the most painful warning of all. When the creatures most faithful to their place no longer have room to live, humanity is also shrinking its own place of refuge. God does not need to speak loudly to warn. He allows the silence of the sky to speak instead. Fewer birds, fewer stars, fewer moments of stillness, and more noise. Humans have grown so accustomed to noise that they fear silence. Yet silence is where God often speaks. When the sky is no longer quiet, humanity can no longer hear. God does not condemn humanity for developing. He only asks, develop for what purpose and at what cost? If progress causes the sky to suffocate, then humanity will soon suffocate within its own achievements. A polluted sky does not only dim the sunlight, it also blurs the boundary between right and wrong. When people grow used to a grey sky, they gradually accept a grey life, not bad enough to resist, not good enough to heal. God calls this the weariness of the soul. And he says, not as an accusation, but as an awakening. When you wound the sky, you wound your own ability to look upward. Yet God still allows hope to fly through the air. For if humanity will only stop, if they will only listen, if they will remember that the sky is not a dumping ground, but a covenant, then the sky can still be healed. And when the sky is healed, humanity will be healed with it. The sky not only has its place in nature, but also its place in the spiritual life of human beings. From the very beginning, humanity was created with the ability to look upward. No other creature pauses and lifts its gaze the way humans do. This is not accidental. God placed within humanity an upward-oriented emptiness, a longing that reaches beyond what can be seen. The sky became the symbol of that longing, not as an escape from the earth, but as a way to understand the earth more deeply. When people live within their proper place, the sky does not pull them away from life. It helps them live that life more fully. The place of the sky in spiritual life is where humans learn to accept limits, to know who they are and who they are not, to know they may reach upward, but not to replace God, to know they are invited to fly, yet still called to return. The birds of the air teach humanity that one can rise very high without losing direction, as long as one does not forget where one belongs. In spiritual life, the sky is the place of prayer, not because God dwells above, but because prayer frees humans from a self-enclosed way of seeing. When people stop praying, the sky within them gradually closes. They live, but no longer look up. They succeed, but no longer feel wonder. They possess, but no longer know gratitude. The sky in the spiritual life is also a place of waiting. Just as migratory birds wait for the proper season, humans are invited to wait for the right time. Not every door must be opened immediately. Not every word needs to be spoken at once. When people rush, they often invoke faith to conceal impatience. But the God of the sky is the God of timing. He does not arrive early to please, nor late to punish. He arrives on time. The place of the sky is also the place of letting go. Looking upward reminds humans that they are not the center of everything. Some things must be entrusted. Some burdens must be released. Birds of the air do not carry what is unnecessary when they fly far. Humans, however, often carry too much resentment, comparison, anxiety, and call it responsibility. But the sky does not sustain such weight. In the great conclusion of creation, God does not invite humanity to abandon the earth to live in the sky. He invites them to live on the earth with eyes lifted toward heaven, so that when they bend down to work, they do not forget to look up and be reoriented, so that when they rise high in achievement, they still remember to bow low in humility. When humans live within the sky's proper place in their spiritual lives, the sky is no longer distant but becomes breath itself. And then the word of God no longer sounds like thunder, but like a gentle wind, gentle enough that those who listen can hear and those who live rightly can understand. For the sky never forces anyone to look up, but those who look up long enough will know they are being called back to their rightful place. And that is where life becomes whole.